accomplices in extinguishing your right to the free exercise of contract. What Congress is now saying is that Article 1, Clause 3, Clause 8, or Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause, means something it has never meant in the history of our country. The clause says, Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. This clause was established because under the Articles of Confederation, the colonies regulated their own commerce. So Massachusetts might put a tariff on ships coming in. New York might put a different tariff and compete with one another. And then when they started to exchange goods across the state lines, they would retaliate against one of them undercutting another one's tariff and taking their business away. Then that affected interior states who didn't have access to the coastline and ships. So this created a lot of animosity in our country, and so they said what we want to do is we want to give the commerce power to regulate between the states and with foreign countries to one central government, one general government. And they did that in Article 1, Section 8. And the purpose of that was to create free trade among the several states. So Congress, ever since this country has been founded, has been regulating commerce, actual trade between the states. But what they're saying this clause now means is that your failure to buy something adversely affects commerce, and therefore they can coerce you under threat of penalty to engage in that activity. They're creating the commerce that they want to regulate. And once this principle, if we allow this to stand, once this principle is established, every right you have goes with it. There is no area of your life that they can't then regulate. Even your free exercise of religion is at stake here. And it's at stake because the vast majority of us are members of 501c3 corporations that are doing business in interstate commerce. This is very serious, folks. Another issue here that people aren't talking about is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. The power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states is coextensive. You can't separate it. So under NAFTA, Chapter 11 allows an individual investor in Mexico or Canada to sue the United States, any of the states, or individual companies for adversely affecting interstate commerce. If the Commerce Clause means that your lack of doing something adversely affects interstate commerce, then your lack of doing something adversely affects international commerce. Does that make sense? So what happens out of that is they get to sue in a secret NAFTA court. You have no judicial review. The states have no judicial review. The United States has no judicial review. Your judicial review is the World Trade Organization. So what's going to happen out of that is somebody's going to be not doing business with another company in Mexico. And he's going to say, well, you're buying your raw goods from an American company. That adversely affects interstate commerce. So he sues in a NAFTA court and gets a judgment. And the next thing you know, the United States is saying, the raw products you're buying to make your products with, you've got to buy them from Mexico. This completely destroys the entire concept of our dual systems of government, what we call federalism. And it places you ultimately under the control of foreign nations.
So how are you going to overturn GATT?
That's a problem, sir. I don't have the answer to that. You know, all I know what we can do right now is try to overturn Obamacare. And the issue is called interposition. The Declaration of Independence is an act of interposition. It's when the American citizens said, no, We are not going to submit to tyranny. And they stood up against it, and they united against it. In 1798, under President John Adams, Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Act. Thomas Jefferson was vice president, and he wrote a resolution of interposition for the state of Kentucky. James Madison wrote a resolution of interposition for the state of Virginia. Those two resolutions, within just 6 to 8 months, completely changed the political landscape. John Adams lost the presidential election. Thomas Jefferson was elected for 2 terms, and James Madison followed him for 2 terms. What this says is very simple. Your state government has the duty and obligation to protect your rights. That's why it exists. That's why we established it, to protect our rights. We gave certain limited powers to the general government, nothing more. And when the federal government oversteps that boundary, and when the checks and balances break down, there's another system of checks and balances, and that's dual government, multiple government. And this goes all the way down from the state level to the county level to the local level, township. This is how our system was designed. It's when one government becomes a tyrant, another government stands in between you and the tyrant. It's the concept that God ordained government, civil government, to protect citizens' rights. That way, hopefully, the citizens don't have to appeal to arms every time something like this happens. And that's the idea, to keep peaceful solutions to problems. So what Indiana needs to do is very simple. Indiana needs to pass legislation that says you have the right to contract, simply recognize what you've always had. No, the Commerce Clause does not mean that your inactivity adversely affects interstate commerce, because, folks, when Indiana entered the federal contract, our Constitution, they did so on equal footing with the original states. And they know what they agreed to, and they have the authority to determine what powers they gave and what powers they did not give. And they simply say no. And then they give you the power to protect yourself against this act. So the solution to the problem is to get our state to stand up and protect your rights. And that's it. And we can do that. We have to return our focus back to state government and local government. Get a bill sponsored in the State House. Get co-sponsors for it. Get people like you that are talking to your local representatives and your senators and tell them, yes, protect my rights. That's all there is to it.